Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Imperfect Adventure podcast. Again, trying this video podcast idea as well, just so I can share it in some other places. But primarily the podcast will be in audio. But then I also have the video version. I don't know if people enjoy this. I don't know if, I'm not getting ready for you. I'm not getting camera ready. Because it is the Imperfect Adventure. So it's just me on a morning having my coffee with my Ted Lasso cup because he's my favorite. It's my favorite show. And it is October of 2021, and I am sharing about nutrition. So last week, I shared my story of some digestive issues that I was having had been having since I was a teenager. And now this week, I'm going to share my son's journey. My son, Jeffrey, my middle son, he's my son with special needs. And I'm going to share sort of his nutrition, what I learned trying to help him with some of his health concerns. And it's interesting because you would think that my story came first, right? That I tried things for myself and then realized that they worked and then went ahead and tried it with my child. But that is not the truth. Actually, all of my nutrition stuff that I did and learned all started with Jeffrey. So I'm also recording this from a very raw place because Jeffrey is in the hospital right now. We're going through a very difficult couple weeks with him. He has got a horrible migraine. And he's been in the hospital now. This is probably day 5 or 6, something like that. He was home and then had to go back. And even before that, we were managing it at home spectacularly poorly. We were managing it at home for about 4 days. So, but I didn't want to not do my podcast. I feel like this might be really helpful for me to distract myself a bit from all that's going on. So Jeffrey he's really struggled since my pregnancy. I had issues all throughout my pregnancy. There were some concerns about his development in utero. And then after he was delivered, he had some issues kind of right from the get-go. And so we got multiple diagnoses from infancy. And then we finally, he was about 3.5, we went to see a developmental pediatrician. If you've ever been down the developmental pediatrician road, I know that there's some special needs moms or families that listen to this podcast. It takes a long time to get an appointment with a developmental pediatrician. Like, it's not something that you can just call up and be like, hey, I want this appointment. There's multiple things like hoops that you have to jump through so that they can really determine if you need a developmental pediatrician. So it took us some time to get in to see a developmental pediatrician. And that is where he got his autism diagnosis and his ADHD diagnosis. And during that follow-up appointment, one of the things that came up was medications for him. And a medication was recommended for him that I was not convinced I wanted to put him on. I don't have anything against medications. Like I said, Jeffrey's in the hospital right now and he is on a slew of meds to try to manage his migraine. But at this point in his life, he was about 4 years old, and the medication that was recommended felt really strong to me. And it also felt like it was like a big leap, from nothing to like this strong medication that I knew all about the side effects from it. And I also sort of felt like if we start there, like what are we going to do next? Because it was all behavioral at this point. He was having a lot of behaviors. So, I remember saying to her, is there anything else? Is there anything else we could try first, right? Do we have to go right to medications? I wasn't saying never. I was just saying like, not right now, And I remember her writing on her plan, paper to give us. It was like a double-sided, or not double-sided, almost like had duplicate copies, right? So she wrote on it and then she gave us like the pink portion or something kind of with the plan. And she wrote on there, well, you can try nutrition. You can see, there is some, research out there that suggests that certain foods can make ADHD worse. And make kids more impulsive and less focused and that kind of stuff. And it's this grouping of foods called salicylates. They are, there's synthetic salicylates and also naturally derived salicylates. And it can, there's some research. And she did say, that the research, there was some research, but it wasn't like definitive. It was like, it works for some people and doesn't work for others. And she was very nice. I'm not saying anything bad about this developmental pediatrician. She was wonderful, but she didn't seem super convincing. Like she wasn't like, this is really going to help. It was more, do you just want to try? Like it's worth a try. And she just wasn't like emphatic about it. Like, whoa, this is going to be really helpful. But I felt like it was worth a try. And the diet that we tried is called the Feingold diet. It's been around since the 70s. I came home and did research, and it's so funny because like we didn't really have like Google back then. Like we had the web, but like it was before Facebook, there wasn't any Facebook group that I could get on to be like, hey, other moms, like help me. So I had to go to the actual Feingold website. It's feingold.org. And so I went to the actual Feingold website, and then you have to become a member, and then they send you, I called it the Feingold Bible, but it's literally like, I think they update it every year, but it was the updated version of like all of the approved foods. Because what I started to research, what I found was that salicylates, especially synthetic ones, are a lot of preservatives in food. So it's preservatives, food dyes, and flavorings. And so within like a brand, there could be certain flavors or like certain cereals, right? If you were looking at like all the Cheerios, let's say, there could have been some Cheerios that were okay and some Cheerios that were not. And so you really needed, like they did all of this legwork, which was amazing and so helpful. Because I remember like getting all the information from them and being completely overwhelmed because it was so specific. It wasn't like I could just go and be like, oh, I know that like this box of snacks is safe for my son. It was more like this box, this flavor, reading the label. I mean, and not everything is labeled well. Like some, especially the flavors, they can just write like, flavoring added or, natural flavors, but don't really give you the specifics of what that makes up, because a lot of it is like the brand, it's their proprietary property, because it's there, like, think of like KFC, it's like their, 17 different spices, they're not going to share their recipe with you. And so you ran into that a lot. So this organization, Feingold, really did a lot of the research for you, but you still, like, I still, at the end of the day, had this Bible that I needed to sort of figure out what he could eat and what he couldn't eat. And the way that Feingold works is it's an elimination diet, just like what I did, but just with a different focus. So you're removing all of these salicylates, both synthetic and natural. And it was overwhelming. There's literally no other word for it. I remember making a list. I remember writing out like what we were going to have for dinner, what we were going to have for snack. I remember this was like my first foray into Whole Foods. It was before we even had a Trader Joe's locally, but we had a Whole Foods. So I went to Whole Foods, and I remember being in the aisle at Whole Foods. My first mistake was that I brought all the kids with me. I don't really think I had an option. They were all home, and, my daughter at the time wasn't in school full time. It was just, I had a baby, like whatever. I had to bring them, but I remember just crying in the aisle because like I had the book in front of me, I had my list, like he really loved goldfish, or the kids, certain snack foods that I really wanted to try to replace for them. And I remember just standing in the aisle and like flipping through that Bible and being like, there's not like that particular flavor isn't here that he can have. I would pick one up and be like, oh, and then like, this might be it. And then I would look at the book and be like, it's not, it was just so overwhelming. But I also knew that we had to do something. He was miserable. We were miserable. It was not a good family environment for his behavior to be so out of control that it sort of Jeffrey's behavior and mood and all of that dictated everything that was going on in our family. And it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to me, my husband, or my other two children. And so it was like, go all in and give this diet a try, or just put him on medication, which I really felt strongly I wasn't ready to do yet. And so, I pushed through the hard. I will say a few tips that were really helpful looking back over that time was making a list, having a meal plan. Feingold, because it was an elimination diet, was 4 weeks. So I did definitely put my sights on the fact that like this was short term. I had to like suck it up and figure it out for 4 weeks. And like we could do anything for 4 weeks. I also put my entire family on the diet because I could not in my brain kind of manage like, oh, I can make this dinner or this lunch or this breakfast for everybody else. And then Jeffrey's going to have this special thing. I just could not, that was not in my realm of possibility. I was like, if he's going to do it, we're all going to do it. And that way it's just one thing, right? One thing I was preparing for. And so I got all the Feingold information. I sat down, I made a meal plan, which I'm not typically really good at, but for short term, I can do it. So I sat down and I was like, I am going to figure out dinners. I chose like, they had recipes and stuff in there. I chose like seven or eight different dinner options and just rotated through them that I figured my family would like. Some they did, some they didn't. We had to adjust as we went. I also made sure that I had options for all of the kids' preferred snacks, because snacks, they were toddlers, babies at the time. And so snacks were really, really important. And so I knew that that was one of the things that I really needed to adjust, like find a good option for them. So I did that. I figured out the snacks. I figured out like a meal plan, dinners and lunches, kind of the big things that that could be my go-tos and that we could just rotate through instead of feeling like I had to have 20 different dinners. Like that's not necessary. And so we worked through them and it took about, I will say it was about 2.5, 3 weeks into the diet. And really in the beginning, you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like you don't see change right away. Change it's not like immediate, and I remember more than once wanting to throw the towel in. Like that is a normal experience. And I just felt like there's just like nothing's helping. Like I don't see a difference. And I'm going to all this effort to help him and it's just not working. Like, it was had some really like dark nights of the soul. You know what I mean? Like just, this is awful. Why am I doing this? Throw in the towel feeling. But I kept going back to like, just one more day, just one more day. It's only 28 days. Even if this is like an utter failure, at least I can say I tried for 28 days. And if I have to like wave the white flag of surrender and call the doctor and get him on medication, like that's what we'll do. And so it was around 2.5, 3 weeks where I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Like my husband and I both came to that realization at the same time where we were like, all right, he's getting a little bit easier. He's not so extreme in his moods. He wasn't escalating so fast. It wasn't like he was like, crying and then he would be like losing his mind, like, whew, like really fast, like 0 to 60. It was sort of taking him longer to ramp up and a little bit easier for us to bring him down with behavior modification and stuff that we had been trying for a really long time. And then we had planned, as luck would have it, we had planned this, months in advance, but we were getting a picture taken of all of the cousins as a gift for my in-laws for Christmas. And so we had planned, 6 kids under the age of 7. We're going to get a picture of the 6 of them. And mind you, 3 of them were under age 1. And so we were like, this is going to be a disaster. I mean, Jeffrey had trouble focusing anyway, didn't really love sitting still. We were going to sit him and pose him and expect him to look at the camera. And, amongst all of the kids, really struggling to do that. And so we're at the picture place. All the kids are there. I'm like sweating already because I'm like, this is going to be a nightmare. And I was more concerned about Jeffrey than I was about my baby, my 1-year-old. I was like, he'll probably tolerate it well. And I could not believe the change. Jeffrey sat, he listened. He was able to smile when they asked him to smile, which is a big deal for autistic kids. He was actually able to make eye contact with the camera, which is a big deal for kids with autism as well. They typically tend to look away. And I mean, we have the most beautiful picture still, and I can see it in my mind's eye. We have the most beautiful picture from that day. And I started crying because it was in that moment that I realized what a difference this diet had made for him. It was just beautiful. And I just hold that picture so dear to my heart because it was like my first real, I think, ray of hope for him. That we could do this, that we could figure out what Jeffrey needed and help him through it. Like as his mom, that I had maybe more power than I thought I did. I didn't have to hand it all over to his medical team. I love his doctors, still do to this day. But at the end of the day, what I realized is I'm bringing this kid home in whatever situation is going on, even him in the hospital right now, right? Like he's going to have to come home to me and I'm going to have to manage his medical care, his new regimen, like whatever we end up, whatever he ends up coming home on, I'm the one that has to live with it and deal with it, right? Me and the family. So I really felt in that moment that I realized that I could be a part of the solution and that I had a little bit more power than maybe I believed I did in the beginning. And so it was such an empowering moment, such an empowering period of time for me. And it was also really eye-opening because researching diet and like what goes into making our food and just the processing, especially the processed food, like the processing and even the hormones in meat and dairy products. And, you kind of start going down this rabbit hole of research and it is terrifying. At the time, the documentary Food 911 was out and I watched it and I was like, and I tell everybody, if you're going to watch a documentary on food, be prepared to change the way that you eat because you cannot unsee it. You cannot unhear the information. And so that's what was happening. Like I literally was, going from one thing, first Feingold, and then it was like, what other things do I need to think about or worry about? And oh my God, I mean, we've completely transformed our diet based off of that moment in time, still to this day, 14 years later, 15 years later, because I couldn't unknow what I was learning, right? So I was like, well, if I know this is bad for us, why would I ever eat that again? Sort of a feeling. And so we've completely changed because I really sat back and said, like, what the heck am I feeding my kids? Like, this is terrible. Like I should not be feeding my kids this stuff. I had no idea what went into the foods that like some of their favorite foods. And so we've just never brought them back, much to their chagrin sometimes. But it's funny now that they're older, they're teenagers, young adults, they're all of them are really, really grateful that we decided like as a family to kind of have a pretty clean, we have junk and stuff now and then, but they've all said as they've grown that they're really, really happy that we eat the way that we do and that they have so much knowledge around food choices. This is a ongoing conversation that we've had in our family. and even my daughter being off at college, she's been like, I'm shocked by the way people eat, because we never ate that way. I'm just shocked. And I don't want to eat that way. And kind of when she went to college, she was like, oh, I ate terrible for a while and I felt awful. Like, I'm so glad that I wasn't raised to eat that way. And this is no judgment. I mean, I think we all have our own journey. But this is why I'm so passionate about educating around nutrition, because you don't have to be perfect all the time. I always say 80-20 is the rule. But when you know better, you do better. And it's ongoing research for me. There's things, that I still I know I had to adjust, like my coffee years ago when I kind of learned about the pesticides in coffee. I was like, okay, I got to choose a different brand. It's like an evolving conversation. I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still figuring out what works for me, what doesn't work for me. But I truly believe that I've empowered my children to do the same. And for that, I am incredibly grateful. But it's super, super important. Like, this moment in time solidified just how important nutrition is. And the good news is we get to choose, right? This is something that we can take control of. And we can say, like, I'm going to make the best nutrition choices that I can for myself, given my health history, my family history, what I'm at risk for, how I'm feeling right now, right? You can really do the work to come up with a nutrition plan that is best for you and that is more or less effortless. And I know I say that a lot to my coaching clients, like, we really can get there. We've got to do the work in the beginning. But then, and I know for me, it's become effortless. Like, I just know now, it's become a habit, what works for me and what doesn't. And so I can make better choices for me, and make better choices for Jeffrey. And that was really where this all started. So I hope this was helpful to you. Next week, I'm going to be back with, some more thoughts on nutrition. And I hope you are enjoying this nutrition month of October. If you have any questions, reach out. I always put in the show notes how you can reach out to me. Just send me a Facebook message. And so the link is there in the show notes on my website, www.familywellnesswarriors.com/podcast. All right, everybody, have a great week.